Look closely at the desk of a high-profile law firm in the heart of London. Resting under the dim glow of a banker's lamp is a thick leather-bound folder. It is marked with a heavy red stamp that reads "Confidential Leak." This is not just another tabloid story or a fleeting headline from a gossip column. This is the physical manifestation of a 120 Inute audio deposition. A raw, unfiltered account that is currently sending shockwaves from the United Kingdom to the shores of California. What we are witnessing is not merely a father's emotional outburst. In the world of high-stakes corporate branding, this is a catastrophic risk management failure for Archewell. For years, the public has been fed a carefully curated narrative, a redacted version of history where certain facts were blacked out to protect the legitimacy of the Sussex brand. But now Thomas Markle has done the unthinkable. He has effectively triggered a breach of the unredacted archive. He isn't just telling his side of the story anymore. He is releasing the raw data that the Duke and Duchess have spent millions of dollars trying to keep under a strategic freeze. In the recording, Thomas Markle's voice sounds weary but resolute. He was overheard telling his legal counsel that he had spent years waiting for a knock on the door that never came. He reportedly said that he had watched his own life being rewritten in high-definition documentaries, and he felt as though his very existence had been redacted from his daughter's new royal history. He claimed that the letters the world discussed were only a fraction of the truth, and that the unedited versions contained secrets that would call into question the entire foundation of the Sussex's public record. This is the moment the unredacted archive becomes a weapon. When we talk about an unredacted contract, we are talking about seeing the hidden clauses, the secret agreements, and the parts that were meant to stay in the shadows. Thomas Markle is no longer just a disgruntled relative. He is the source of a massive leak that exposes the gap between the public performance and the private reality. Before we dive deeper into the specific secrets found in those 120 minutes, I want to invite you to join our community. If you believe that the public deserves the full story without the redacting pen, hit the like button right now. It helps this video reach more people who are tired of the polished PR. If you are new here, subscribe to Sussex Unmasked and join thousands of others who are looking for the truth behind the headlines. And tell me in the comments, do you think a father has the right to release unredacted family secrets if he feels his reputation has been damaged? We want to hear your thoughts. The danger for the Sussexes in 2026 is that they can no longer control the flow of information. Archewell was built on the idea of controlling the narrative, but a narrative only works if the archive remains closed. By opening these files, Thomas Markle has removed the protective layer. He is forcing the world to look at the parts of the story that were never meant to be seen. This isn't just about family drama. It's about the survival of a multi-million-dollar brand. When the archive is breached, the carefully constructed image begins to fracture, revealing a reality that is far more complex and far more damaging than anyone ever imagined. The redacted era is over. The unredacted era has begun. To understand the true nature of the crisis currently unfolding in 2026, we have to look past the royal titles and view the situation through the cold lens of a corporate takeover. For years, the Duchess of Sussex has been marketed to the world as a self-made icon. A woman who pulled herself up by her own bootstraps to become a global humanitarian and a princess. But the unredacted documents provided by Thomas Markle reveal a very different reality. In this story, Thomas Markle was never just a father. He was the original founder and the primary angel investor of the entity we now know as Meghan Markle. Every global brand requires initial venture capital, and for the Sussex brand, that capital was entirely tangible. We are talking about $200,000 for a high-end education at Northwestern University. We are talking about thousands of dollars for elite acting coaches, private tutors, and the very first professional headshot that allowed her to enter the Hollywood ecosystem. These weren't just paternal gestures. They were the research and development costs of a manufactured persona. Thomas reportedly spoke to a close confidant about the sheer scale of his investment. He was overheard saying that he didn't just pay for a degree, he paid for the polish and the poise that would eventually captivate a prince. He reportedly noted that every time he saw her on television talking about her struggle to make it in the industry, it felt like his own signature was being erased from the contract. He wasn't just a dad watching his daughter. He was a silent partner watching his intellectual property being rebranded as a solo venture. When you look at it through this analytical framework, the current hostility between the father and the daughter takes on a much darker tone. In the business world, when a company becomes successful, the original founder is often seen as a liability, especially if they know too much about the early unpolished stages of production. Once the royal marriage occurred, Thomas Markle was effectively treated as a distressed asset. He was something to be liquidated or hidden away, because his presence reminded the world that the self-made narrative was in fact a carefully funded production. This is why Thomas is speaking out now with such surgical precision. He isn't just looking for an apology, he is asserting his rights as the original architect of the story. By releasing details of the tuition checks and the receipts for the lifestyle he provided, he is reclaiming the intellectual property of her history. He is showing the world the raw materials that we used to build the icon. One legal expert analyzing the leak suggested that if this were a corporate case, it would be seen as a founder suing for being illegally ousted after a massive IPO. The world sees a family feud, but we are seeing a liquidity crisis of the truth. If the foundation of the self-made humanitarian is proven to be a myth funded by a Hollywood lighting director, then the value of the entire Sussex brand begins to plummet. It raises the question, if the origin story is a fabrication, what else in the current narrative has been manufactured for public consumption? As Thomas prepares to reveal the next batch of unredacted files, the tension in Monteado is reportedly reaching a breaking point. They aren't just worried about a father's hurt feelings. They are worried about the total collapse of their brand's origin story. And as we look toward the next revelation, one has to wonder what happens when the angel investor decides it's time to burn the portfolio. The calendar takes us back to the spring of 2018. On the surface, the world was witnessing a fairy tale, the ultimate merger between Hollywood glamour and a thousand-year empire. But if you look beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, what was actually occurring was a sophisticated corporate purge. In the high-stakes world of global branding, a merger of this magnitude requires a pristine balance sheet. To become a senior partner in the House of Windsor, the Sussex brand had to eliminate its legacy liabilities. And in this specific calculation, the Markle family was seen as a series of outdated shareholders whose presence threatened to dilute the value of the new royal stock. This was not a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. It was a strategic freeze. According to sources deep within the palace infrastructure at the time, the decision to isolate Thomas Markle was handled with the cold efficiency of a hostile takeover. One senior aide reportedly described the internal directive as a cleansing operation. They were instructed that any connection to the pre-production phase of Meghan's life, the phase funded and facilitated by her father, had to be neutralized. The goal was to present a finished product, a self-made humanitarian who appeared to have materialized out of thin air, fully formed and ready for the throne. The dialogue reported from behind the scenes during those final weeks before the wedding is telling. A former staff member overheard a conversation where the necessity of managing the father was discussed not in terms of family health but in terms of brand security. When the paparazzi scandal broke the photos of Thomas Markle in Mexico, it was treated by the public as a tragedy, but within the Sussex camp, it was allegedly viewed as the perfect justification for a permanent lockout. He had become a security breach in their carefully constructed narrative. By freezing him out, they weren't just protecting their privacy, they were protecting their monopoly on the truth. Think about the logic of a strategic freeze. In the business world, you stop communicating with a party to prevent them from having any current data points to share. By cutting all ties, the Sussexes ensured that anything Thomas Markle said would eventually become old news. They were betting that the world would move on and that his voice would lose its relevance as the new royal brand took center stage. They needed him to remain a ghost, a silent figure from a past that no longer existed. But let's pause and engage in a direct challenge. I want you to look back at the documented timeline of 2018. Ask yourself this. Do you honestly believe that a global PR machine backed by millions of dollars and some of the most sophisticated crisis managers in London and Los Angeles would accidentally leave a security hole as basic as an unmanaged father in a small town in Mexico? Or was the chaos of that week a deliberate cold-blooded calculation designed to create a clean break? When you have that much money and power at your disposal, accidents of this scale rarely happen. Do the math yourself. The purge was successful for a time. The wedding went ahead. The brand soared. And the original founder was left in the shadows. But as we see now in 2026, a corporate purge only works if the outdated shareholders stay silent. Thomas Markle has decided he is no longer willing to be a redacted footnote in his own daughter's history. The strategic freeze has thawed, and the information that is beginning to leak out suggests that the 2018 cleanup was far more extensive and far more ruthless than anyone could have guessed. What exactly was so dangerous that they had to bury a father to keep the secret safe? The answer lies in the next set of unredacted files. Reputation is perhaps the most expensive asset in the global economy, but it is also the most volatile. To maintain the prestige of the Sussex brand in 2026, the Duke and Duchess have had to employ a concept we call moral mathematics. This is the cold, calculated process of weighing the cost of truth against the price of silence. When you look at the balance sheets of the Sussexes' various legal battles and PR campaigns, the numbers reveal a staggering and deeply uncomfortable disparity. On one side of the ledger, we have the hemorrhaging of capital. Archwell and its associated entities are estimated to be spending upwards of $5 million annually on elite legal firms in London and high-level reputation management agencies in Hollywood. This is a war chest dedicated to a single purpose: litigation as a silencer. They are paying for the power to redact headlines, to sue media outlets into submission, and to freeze any narrative that does not align with their carefully polished image. They are effectively spending a fortune to buy a version of history where they are the perpetual victims. On the other side of this moral equation, we have a retired lighting director living in a modest house in Rosarito, Mexico. Thomas Markle is an 80-year-old man whose monthly expenses are a fraction of what his daughter spends on a single wardrobe for a charity event. He does not have a PR team. He does not have a bot army on social media to defend his honor. He does not have a digital infrastructure. He has a landline and a lifetime of unredacted memories. A forensic accountant, who has been tracking the Sussexes' public filings recently, noted a bizarre anomaly. He was overheard saying that the sheer volume of capital being diverted to legal protections against a single elderly man is unprecedented in the celebrity world. It is the financial equivalent of using a nuclear weapon to swat a fly. He reportedly remarked that for every dollar Thomas Markle earns from a rare interview, the Sussexes are spending $10,000 in legal fees and crisis communication to discredit him. Think about the sheer absurdity of this arithmetic. Imagine a multi-million-dollar corporation backed by the machinery of Hollywood losing its collective mind over the words of a man who doesn't even know how to use a hashtag. Pause for 2 seconds. The math simply does not add up for a couple that claims to champion compassion in action. If your brand is built on empathy, how do you justify spending millions to legally bankrupt your own father? The financial hemorrhaging is a symptom of a much deeper panic. They aren't just fighting an 80-year-old man. They are fighting the ghost of their own origin story. Thomas Markle reportedly told a Diddy confidant that the legal letters he receives are written in a language of such cold corporate hostility that he barely recognizes his daughter's influence in them anymore. He allegedly said, "They spend more on one legal threat than I spend in a year on groceries. If I am as irrelevant as they claim, why are they so afraid of my voice?" This is the central paradox of their moral mathematics. If the truth they presented in their documentaries and books was absolute, why does it require $5 million a year in legal security to protect it? A fortress is only necessary if you are hiding something valuable or something dangerous. As Thomas Markle prepares to release the next batch of unredacted evidence, the cost of suppression is rising. They are bleeding money to keep the lid on a story that is already boiling over. And as the capital continues to drain, the question becomes, what happens when the money for the lawyers finally runs out and the unredacted truth is all that remains? While the legal war rooms in California are buzzing with panic and the airwaves are filled with the echoes of Thomas Markle's latest revelations, there is one place where the silence is almost deafening: the corridors of Buckingham Palace. To the untrained eye, it looks like the British monarchy is ignoring the firestorm. But to those who understand the mechanics of sovereign authority, this silence is not an oversight. It is a masterclass in institutional checkmate. The institution operates on a timeline of centuries, not news cycles. While the Sussexes are playing a high-stakes game of reputation management in the digital age, the palace is adhering to a strict constitutional protocol. They understand a fundamental law of power: never interrupt your opponent when they are making a mistake. By refusing to comment, refute, or even acknowledge the unredacted files coming out of Mexico, The Crown is allowing the Sussex brand to undergo a process of natural asset depreciation. Every time Thomas Markle reveals a new receipt or a forgotten email, the value of the Sussex victimhood narrative drops another few points. The palace doesn't need to hire expensive PR firms to discredit Harry and Meghan. They are allowing the family's own history to do the work for them. It is an administrative victory. One senior royal courtier was reportedly heard whispering to a colleague during a state function that the monarch does not engage with domestic static. The message was clear. The king is busy with the business of the state while the duke is busy with the business of a family feud. This silence serves a dual purpose. First, it reinforces the sovereign authority of the king. By staying above the fray, Charles and William position themselves as the stable core of the nation, contrasting sharply with the chaotic, reactive nature of the Montedo operation. Second, it highlights a glaring weakness in the Sussexes' claim to global leadership. One former palace staffer, speaking under the condition of anonymity, noted that there is a quiet irony being discussed in the staff rooms at Kensington Palace. He reportedly said that it is becoming increasingly difficult for the world to take global impact leaders seriously when they cannot even manage a crisis involving a single 80-year-old man in a beach town. If you cannot govern your own narrative within your own family, how can you expect to influence the governance of the world? This is the ultimate strategic freeze. The palace has effectively removed the Sussexes from the royal balance sheet. They are no longer a part of the institutional narrative. They have been relegated to the world of celebrity gossip. And in the world of celebrity, you are only as valuable as your last headline. By allowing Thomas Markle's unredacted archive to flood the market, the palace is ensuring that the market becomes saturated with Sussex drama, eventually leading to a total collapse in brand interest. The Crown is not fighting a war. They are simply waiting for the Sussexes to finish fighting themselves. As the unredacted truth continues to leak, the gap between the royal image they try to project and the reality their father reveals grows wider every day. The king remains silent, the queen remains stoic, and the Prince of Wales remains focused. Behind the scenes, the administrative checkmate is already complete. The only thing left to see is how the Sussexes will react when they realize they aren't just losing the battle with Thomas Markle. They have already lost the war with the institution. But as the next revelation looms, one must ask, is there a point where the palace will be forced to break its silence? Or will they let the Sussex brand fade into the background of history, one redacted file at a time? We have reached the final pages of the unredacted files. But in many ways, the real crisis for the Sussex brand is only just beginning. As we look at the wreckage of this 2026 PR cycle, a clear and devastating pattern emerges. This was never just about a family feud or a disgruntled father in Mexico. This was about the fundamental collapse of a global branding campaign that was built on a foundation of rewritten history. When you build a multi-million-dollar empire on an origin myth, the truth doesn't just hurt, it devalues your entire operation. The mask of the self-made global humanitarian has not just slipped. It has been completely dismantled by the very person who helped construct the original frame. What we are left with is a business in a state of total panic, suffering from a terminal liquidity crisis of authenticity. You can hire the most expensive image consultants in the world, and you can secure the most prestigious legal teams to issue threats. But you cannot legislate away the existence of the past. This brings us to the aristocratic punchline of this entire saga. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have spent the better part of half a decade attempting to rewrite their own founding prospectus. They have tried to redact the inconvenient chapters of their lives and edit out the people who no longer fit the high-gloss aesthetic of their royal-adjacent lifestyle. But the irony is as sharp as a diamond. They forgot a fundamental rule of the archives. The man who holds the original ledger with every entry still visible and every line unblacked is still sitting there. A close associate of Thomas Markle reportedly summed up the situation with a chilling observation. He was overheard saying that no amount of Hollywood magic can erase a paper trail that began 30 years ago. He reportedly remarked that you can sign a 100 million-old contract with a streaming giant like Netflix and you can pose for the covers of the most influential magazines on the planet, but you cannot buy the right to unilaterally delete the person who signed the very first checks of your life. You cannot fire your founding investor when he still owns the rights to your history. The Sussexes' attempt to treat their family history as a corporate liability that could be purged in 2018 has backfired in the most public way possible. By trying to silence the truth, they only succeeded in making it more valuable. Now, as the unredacted files continue to circulate, the world is seeing the Sussexes not as the visionary leaders they claim to be, but as a pair of desperate editors trying to stop a leak in a dam that has already burst. This analysis is based on public records, reported statements, and expert commentary for the purposes of education and discussion. The views expressed are intended to provide a deeper look at the intersection of royal tradition and modern branding. Here at Sussex Unmasked, we believe that the full story is always more interesting than the redacted one. If you have enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden ledgers of the Monteto brand and you want to ensure you never miss a chapter as this story continues to unfold, do us a small favor. Hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that truth matters. Subscribe to Sussex Unmasked and hit the notification bell so you are the first to know when the next archive is breached. Finally, tell us in the comments, do you think the Sussex brand can ever recover from these unredacted revelations? We read every single insight from our community. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. The next league is always just around the corner.